If you have been wondering whether you have been reconciling bank transactions properly in Xero, or whether you are missing a trick, then this video is for you. We are going to be covering all things bank reconciliation, and as a bonus, I am going to be sharing with you my 333 framework to help you become an absolute whiz at doing bank reconciliation in Xero. Hi, my name is Ray Armand and I am a chartered accountant. I run an accounting practice based in the UK. Well, actually two accounting practices in different niched areas. In my main accounting practice, there's a team of 8 of us, and in my other practice where we specialize in an area called service charge accounts, there are 5 of us. So I'm used to looking after a team of people who run the accounting and bookkeeping function for businesses spread across the entirety of the UK. I myself am also a business owner. My husband and I own 6 businesses between us. So I do bring to my training the perspective of both the accountant and the business owner. So my goal is to help you to get as much kind of high impact value while also doing things as accurately as possible. So it's not just always about the quick fix, but it's not about doing everything 100% accuracy. It's about finding that balance so that you're not spending ridiculous amount of time, but you're also getting everything nailed as much as it needs to be. Okay? Now, to make this particular training session fun, what I've decided to do, let me just minimize my face a bit here, is to show you how you can follow along using the demo company in Xero. Now, as soon as you have access to a Xero account because you've subscribed for your business, you automatically get access to a demo company. How you can access that is by hitting the menu option here of your company or business name, and you would hit this change organization and type in the word demo, and it should come up as an option for you to select. If you have previously worked within the demo company and played around with transactions, and so the transactions are slightly different to what I have on the screen, you can reset your demo company data, and to do that all you need to do is to come down here to My Xero, and then when you click on that, it's going to open into you can see it's got like a green heading. This is the back end of your Xero where you manage your subscriptions. Now when you hit that My Xero, it should automatically bring you to the subscriptions tab, but if it doesn't, you want to hit subscriptions. And listed here will be all your Xero organizations. At the bottom of that list, you will then see the demo company and the option to reset it. So you can hit this reset button and it will then reset all the transactions to the original form so that you can follow along exactly with what I am doing. You can also change your country or edition, and what that basically means is mine will be set to the UK, you can see, so you might want to set it to the UK or to the international edition, or the international version should I say, and the edition would be like what sort of Xero subscription level package you've got. Okay, so you can come here, reset your demo data, and then you will be able to follow along. So let's talk about what the bank reconciliation process actually is. Now, the precursor to doing any form of a bank recon is to actually have your bank transactions in Xero. Now, what I do also want to say at this point is that it's important to note that the bank recon is like a pivotal or a core part of actually bookkeeping. It has to be done. Other things you can get away without doing, you can get away without entering bills or invoices even in Xero, but you have to reconcile the bank in Xero in order to have accurate reports that you can run on your business, or have any information that you can run on your business. So the bank recon is where it's all at, okay? So how do you get your bank transactions into Xero? There are 2 main methods. You can either do a manual import of transactions, so this is where you get your bank statement in a CSV format, like an Excel format, and you manually import that into Xero. Or the method I recommend is having your bank feed connected to Xero. What that means is you get your online banking login details and you connect your bank up to Xero, and the information on all those transactions pulls into Xero. Now, if you are unsure how to do that or you're having issues achieving that, I do have a separate video which I will link here so that you know exactly how to get that bank feed connected. But let's assume you've got the bank feed connected. What we are going to do is from the dashboard now, we are going to jump into this reconcile button. Now, what is a bank rec? Just let me take a moment in case you're unsure of what you're actually doing. What you can see on the screen here is on the left-hand side, it says we have our bank statement lines, and on the right, we have our Xero transactions. So that is what we're doing. We're taking each of those transactions that we know have happened in our business because it's in our bank statement, and we are getting transactions in Xero and matching them up. If the transaction doesn't yet exist in Xero, we're going to create that transaction and then match it up. So that's what we are doing so that these two agree all the way along. And once we have all these transactions matched up and fully reconciled, what you should see, because at the top here you'll notice that the bank balance per your bank statement is 6,666, where the bank balance per Xero is 1,335. We want these to all agree. So once you've reconciled all 29 transactions, these two numbers should be exactly the same. If they are different, then there's an issue, and I will have separate videos or training that I do on that, and I'll let you know about that, okay? But that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get those two balances to be identical. Now, this statement balance, do keep in mind that if you're doing a bank feed, like a live feed, that feed will only update every sort of 24 hours or so. So that is probably yesterday's bank balance, not today's bank balance. So it's your bank balance that's actually in your bank account if you were to log in as of yesterday versus what Xero thinks the bank balance is because of the transactions it's aware of. So you want to make sure that you then show Xero all the transactions that have happened so that the two can be on the same page. Now, what else did I want to say here? Well, let's jump into, as I take you through this, I'm going to teach you my 3-3-3 method. What I have created is a very useful resource for you that I will link in the comments below if you would like to get access to that. And that resource is you can open and have running alongside this video and your Xero. And basically that's going to summarize this 3-3-3 method for you. Okay. Now, what I did to create this 3-3-3 method is I basically took every sort of scenario that you would be facing when it came to reconciling your bank and grouped it into 3 categories. And within each of those 3 categories is 3 sort of subcategories or 3 possibilities of what you would deal with. So, without further ado, let's jump into the bank rec and I will explain where it fits in with my 3-3-3 method. Okay. So when it comes to reconciling bank, you can see for this first transaction on the 26th of January, the business paid, so the left-hand column is your spent column and the right-hand column here is your received column. So the business paid £1,223.91 to fast pay. Okay, so as a bare minimum, if you wanted to just smash this bank rec and you had never entered any transactions into Xero before this date, you could in essence just do a who, the what, and the why, and hit OK, and you're good to go. So the minimum that Xero requires is the who, the what, and the why. So as an example, I'll show you. So if we say fast pay, now you can see when I enter fast pay, that contact does not exist, so you could just hit new contact, so it creates like a very basic contact. Let's assume it's motor vehicle expenses, and it's for repairs. Now you can see Xero defaults to a VAT rate, so we've only had to enter those 3 pieces of information. Xero has applied a VAT rate based on what you have set up as a setting or what the default setting is for that account code in Xero. You can of course change it if you know. Now, you would only need to enter a VAT rate if you are a VAT registered business. If you are not VAT registered, all the transactions will default to no VAT, and that's what we would like to see. Okay? Now, if you are, what I did want to say is if you're not VAT registered, you can get away with just coding transactions like this. So you just hit the OK button and it's gone. It's done. you've done what you need to do. Because what that does, when you hit that OK button, it creates the expense transaction in Xero, and then it creates like the bank transaction in Xero to mark that expense as paid. So it's like a two-step process. Okay, so that OK button, now that expense has been created, and when you were to go run a report, you would see that expense. However, what I would recommend for best practice, definitely if you are VAT registered, but even if you're not VAT registered, it's better to do this, is to always attach paperwork or evidence of that transaction to every transaction in Xero. So like the invoice from your supplier or the receipt or anything that you have to evidence that purchase, you should ideally be attaching, like creating a transaction in Xero, attaching that paperwork, and then reconciling. So sure, you can work down the bank going the who, the what, the why, the who, the what, the why, and just smash out the bank rec. But you're not going to be creating a robust set of financial information that if the likes of HMRC, who can go back 6 or 7 years, says, oh, I want to do a bit of a tax investigation on your business, can you provide this evidence? You're not going to have that evidence at hand. So it is better to make sure that you are attaching evidence to and creating a bill for your suppliers or an invoice for your customers, and creating that first and then reconciling Xero. So that would be my number one recommendation. But if you're not VAT registered and you want to keep things simple, you would just be going along and doing the who, the what, and the why. If you want to do things so that you have all the financial records properly and accurately recorded, you then want to apply my 333 method. So let's talk about the method and the first category. So in our first category of the 333, the first of the three, is the scenario where you have a green match. Like you can see on the screen here, green means go. It's a traffic light system. It means Xero has everything it needs to do. You just need to hit that OK button. Now, there are 3 possibilities when it comes to a green match. The first is that it's the correct match, but it has not been marked as paid in Xero. The second is that it's the correct match, but it has already been marked as paid in Xero. And the third is that it's the incorrect match. Xero has suggested a connection that is actually the wrong customer, the wrong supplier, and so you mustn't follow it. So that's like a bit of a warning from me. Just when you see a green, don't just go happy-go-lucky, okay, because it can land you in quite a big mess if you're not double checking that Xero is making the correct suggestion. Because if you go match the wrong payment, let's say to the wrong customer, and you mark an invoice paid from a customer, the wrong customer, and then the right customer who actually has made the payment, you start chasing them for money, that can cause an issue or can cause big issues in trying to clean up your Xero later on. So do keep in mind, under the green sort of category that I've got in my 333 method, to always make sure that you look out for the possibility that Xero could be suggesting the incorrect match. Okay, and in that example, I haven't got one on the screen to show you. You would have to hit find and match, untick what Xero has suggested. So if we do find a match, where Xero here has suggested this, you would have to untick it and tick the correct suggestion. That was if Xero was making an incorrect suggestion. Okay, but in these 2 examples, I'm going to take you through, I'm going to show you that Xero is, in these examples, making the correct suggestion. So in our green, first of our 333 method scenarios, we've spoken about the incorrect match. Let's look at where it's the correct match. But now you have one scenario where it has not been marked as paid, and it's another scenario where it has been marked as paid. Now, if you look here on these transactions, you'll see these 2 little boxes. If you hover over them, you'll see in this first one that it's a sales invoice, and it's got 1 arrow, and here it's got 2 arrows. So what does that actually mean? It's important to understand. So let's focus on this first transaction. On the 7th of March, Ridgeway University paid $6187.50. Now, this left-hand side is purely what is shown on the bank statement. So whoever made this payment was very diligent and put in the reference that they were paying invoice 0035. Now, that makes your job, when you are reconciling the bank, infinitely easier, because you can see that they were intending to pay for invoice 35, and when you look here, I think I lost it because it's find and match, but if you look at the find and match, what Xero is suggesting, it's suggesting that you want to that the payment is for invoice 35. Can you see that? So it helps us to quite easily make sure that these two are the correct match. So when you see this, you can hit the find and match to make doubly sure. But I think before I hit it the first time, there was invoice 35 here. So you could easily see from this front screen that Xero is making a suggestion that it's invoice 35 and it looks correct. Now, where there is only one arrow, that is because the invoice exists in Xero, but it hasn't been marked as paid. Now, that's not a problem. What will happen is when you hit this OK button, Xero will go to that invoice, mark that invoice as paid, so it creates like a bank transaction in Xero, and then it'll match the bank transaction in Xero to the bank statement transaction. So it's like a two-step process. It's marking the invoice as paid, and it's then matching that bank payment in Xero to the bank payment or bank receipt on your bank statement, okay? If we compare it to our other scenario in this kind of green match section of the 333 method, here we have trucks and property management, and we paid them from the business £1,181.25, and we are happy that that's the correct match. Interestingly, in this scenario, you will now see that there's an arrow in both directions. Now, if you hover, I don't know why it's not showing, there we go. It says that a bank transaction exists. So basically, in this scenario, the bill has been, like the supplier bill has been entered into Xero, hopefully with paperwork attached, and that bill has been marked as paid. So probably when you sat down or whoever else in the business sits down to make payments, they marked it as paid to let you know that it had been paid. So in this scenario, the bill exists in Xero, the bill's been marked as paid, and all that we are doing is we are matching the two. Now, the information I'm giving you, you think, well, how is this relevant to bank rec? In both cases, I just hit OK. You did, but I think it's really important that you understand the distinction between those two, because when things go wrong and you need to unpick errors in Xero, you need to understand the difference between those two scenarios. So that's category one, our green match category. When there's a green match, it's either the correct match but not be marked as paid, the correct match but it has been marked as paid, or it's an incorrect match, and we need to carefully check and make sure that we are then matching it to the correct invoice. Let's move on to category number 2. So this is where there is no green match. So Xero hasn't got the big green, let's go, traffic light sign that says you can hit OK. But you know that the paperwork exists in Xero because you have entered that paperwork, you've gone and you've created that bill or you've created that invoice, and so you know that it should be doing a green match. Now, there are 3 scenarios here as to why there wouldn't be a green match. The first is that the payment that you've received or the payment that you've made is for multiple invoices or bills. So you're going to have to group them together. You're going to have to select multiple bills to get this to match. The second is where the payment or receipt is a part payment on a bill or an invoice. So the bill's for 300 and they've only paid 100. And the third scenario is where someone has paid 1 or 2 pence or cents out, and you have to ask yourself, are you going to chase that customer for that 1 pence, or are you just going to write it off? Okay, so in this second category, we know the paperwork is there, but it's not going green. And let's run through each of those. So the first one, smart agency, that is where we know the paperwork is there, because if you're doing the bookkeeping, you should have like an overarching understanding. If you're at all uncertain, you always want to be hitting this find and match. But if you know, you say to yourself, I know I put the paperwork in, or is there a chance I put the paperwork in? We want to hit this find and match. And we're going to go to type in the word smart agency. Now, do keep in mind, if you're using a software provider and they've invoiced you in a currency other than your normal currency, so in this scenario, we in pounds, and let's say they've invoiced you in dollars, the bill might have come through in dollars, so you may need to untick this show GBP items only. So that sometimes catches people, so do make sure that you untick that. You can see in the case of the demo company that there's no non-GBP items here, okay? Now, if you look at this, can you see that we paid Smart Agency $4,500 and there's 2 bills in Xero for $2,000 and $2,500. So if we tick those 2, they match up. You can see Xero does a nice little match. It tells you the totals match. You can either hit this OK button or this reconcile button here at the bottom, and that transaction then disappears. It's a bit like you can gamify it a bit, you can have a bit of fun. Can you get through the whole bank statement? So in our subcategory 2, where we know the paperwork is in Xero, but there's no green match, the first scenario was where we had to add 2 invoices together. Now, the next possibility is where someone, either you have part paid your supplier or your customers part paid you. So in this case, City Limousines, we know they're one of our customers, and they've made us a payment of £100. But we're not sure what invoice that matches up to. So we can see here, again, they've been very useful, and they have said that they have part paid invoice 0017. Now, this is where it's quite good to teach your customers to please put invoice references, because it makes the bookkeeping so much easier. So if we come here, you can see otherwise you would be playing a bit of a guessing game and have to ask them what was their intention with that £100. Because when you hit City, you can see there's a number of invoices from City, and you would be like, oh, which invoice do I match it to? Now, you could assume the oldest invoice, but sometimes people get confused. So if you can get them to put the reference when they make a payment, that's going to make your life so much easier. And they've said they've part paid invoice 0017. So how do you reconcile this? Well, what you do is you hit this tick, and then you're going to see this option for split appears. So you're going to hit that split button, and Xero is going to automatically try to suggest how it should be split. So it's going to use that full £100 value. So the invoice, total amount for the invoice was $250. They've paid $100. So that means the remaining amount that that customer owes you is £150. And that's correct. So we want to use up the full amount that we received against this invoice. So we hit split. So now you can see, you can always scroll down. It's fully reconciled. It's split up the payment on that invoice, and we can hit the OK or the reconcile button. Okay, so that was like option number 2 in our no green match, but we know there's paperwork. Now, option number 3, just in the interest of keeping these together, is where we need to make a minor adjustment because it's just a few cents or pence out. So if we scroll down to Swanston Security, this is a good example of that. So that's the payment on 11th of March. So we know we've made this payment to Swanston Security, and we know that we put the paperwork in. So why is the green match not appearing? You want to hit the find and match, and if you search for Swanston at the top here, you don't have to type the full name. You can see there is a couple of options. Now, sometimes you can hit more details here to see if the bank statement had any other details like references or description. But you can see here that there is no other information. Interestingly, there is an older bill in Xero, and then this new one. So I would wonder why we seem to have skipped this payment. So I would probably go to the bills in Xero at this point and try and work out why is it that we've paid a more recent bill and not an older bill. That's the kind of stuff you want to be asking yourself as you work through the bank reconciliation process. But in this case, let's say I know that I had made this payment and oopsie, I overpaid by 1 pence. I'm not going to ask my supplier for that money back, but I want to get this reconciled. So you're going to hit here, okay? And there is, if you scroll to the bottom, you'll see that the total is out by 1 pence, okay? So it's a tiny amount. What you can do in this case is you can hit this adjustment box, and you can say it's a minor adjustment. So you're just going to, oh, why is my keyboard not working? Hold on a second, my keyboard stopped working. There we go. So the USB became unplugged, and now my camera's not working. Let me just fix this a second. Don't you love technology? Okay, so what you can do here is enter 0,01, and you can see that the totals now match. So we're just doing a minor adjustment to write off that difference. It does create a transaction in the back end, but if you're making only adjustments for like tiny amounts like this, it's not going to impact things like massively. So you don't want to be doing adjustments for like £1, but anything less than like £1 or dollar, whatever currency you're in, you should be fine. So you can hit that reconcile button. So that is the scenario 3 in the, you know there's paperwork, but there's no green match. What do? Okay, so you're either going to need to group invoices together, split invoices up, or do a minor adjustment. Let's move on. We're going to scroll to the top here, and we're going to move on to the third of my 333 framework. And in this one, there's no paperwork in Xero. So there are 3 possibilities here. Now, in these 3 possibilities, I am saying you're not going to ever put paperwork in Xero. So a few minutes ago I said it's so crucial for good record keeping to make sure that you have paperwork attached to every single transaction. But there are 3 scenarios where it makes sense to not have created a transaction first and attached paperwork. And here are the 3 scenarios. Scenario number 1 is where you receive some sort of prepayment or deposit from your customers, okay, or you make some sort of prepayment or deposit. You will want to reconcile that, and when you create that invoice from to the customer in the future, or receive the invoice from that supplier in the future, you can then assign that prepayment to that invoice. So when that deposit or prepayment is made, you just need to reconcile it without paperwork, and that's fine. The other scenario that it's fine not to have paperwork is where for bank fees, because the evidence of the bank fees is the bank statement. So it wouldn't make sense to attach the bank statement when the information has come from the bank statement. So we would reconcile bank fees directly without any paperwork, and I'm going to show you how to do that. And the third scenario where it makes sense that there's no paperwork and we're just going to reconcile without paperwork is where there are bank transfers. So this is where you transfer money between your bank accounts, and I am going to show you how to do that too. So let's jump into those 3 scenarios where there's no paperwork and there's no need to add paperwork or create a transaction first. So the first chat is Jacaranda Maple Solutions. They're a client of ours, and they have paid a deposit in advance of £2,000. So we need to basically, in summary, enter the who, the what, and the why, but we don't want to create a sales transaction because that sale hasn't really taken place. So you don't want to prematurely recognize that income because it's going to increase your tax bill, okay? You want to recognize that it's income received in advance. So what we're going to do in this scenario is we're going to hit the Add Details button, and we are going to, this received as, we want to change that to a prepayment. You will see that Xero has picked up that it's for Jacaranda Maple Solutions. If it hasn't picked up the correct contact, you could type in the contact name at this stage. It's also auto-filled the date from the bank statement details, and it's creating a sequential invoice number. So that's fine. What we want to do is, that's all been auto-filled by Xero. We just want to give it a description. You might want to add more details about the project or the specific job that it relates to. It's auto-filled the amount, and you're going to want to put it to an account called Income in Advance or Revenue in Advance. Now, depending on whether you are VAT registered or not, it defaults to standard VAT, and you might want to leave that if you're not VAT registered, or if you know that a reduced rate of VAT applies. I don't know why. It wants me to upload files. You would hit no VAT or another VAT rate, okay? But in this case, I'm happy with that 2,000. So what I've done is I'm creating a prepayment, which I'll be able to allocate to the invoice at a later date when that is received. Now, you don't want to make a habit of this. This is when it is genuinely someone paying you in advance for something. So don't use this as a method to reconcile supplier or customer payments or receipts, because you haven't got the paperwork yet. This is when it's genuinely because someone's paid you in advance of something. So you can see it creates the transaction, and now we're going to hit this match button. Okay, so that is scenario number 1, where we have no paperwork and we're happy that there is no paperwork. The next scenario is bank fees. Now, as I said, when it comes to bank fees, the bank statement itself is evidence of that transaction. So there's nothing further that we can attach in this case. So you will see here, I haven't typed this in. Xero has automatically populated the who, the what, and the why. And that's what Xero will do. They've made sure that Xero has like AI, smart learning. So if you, when you have received or made a payment to a particular person with like a certain description of a certain amount, Xero will say, well, I know in the past when you've paid £15 to Ridgeway that you've put it to bank fees, so I'm going to suggest that you put it to bank fees again. And that can be really handy. So you don't have to type anything, you can just hit OK. But of course, always do be wary to make sure that it makes sense based on what it's suggesting. So in this case, it's quite simple. All we have to do is hit OK. So that's for bank fees. Now, let's take these next two examples where we've spent money at Cooper Street Bakery and 7-Eleven, and then you can see another Cooper Street Bakery. Now, you will see in the 7-Eleven example that a bank rule exists. So when it comes to not attaching paperwork to transactions, one other way you can achieve that is, when it makes sense not to attach paperwork, is by setting up bank rules. So in the first scenario, Xero kind of made a suggestion to us about what to do because that's how we've treated the transaction in the past. Now, if Xero isn't making consistent suggestions, you can use bank rules as a way to be like, okay, Xero, in future, when this transaction comes in, I want you to treat it this specific way. Okay, and that's what this is doing. It's picked up, you've created a rule, it's saying it would like to apply a rule that has been created by you. So when you pay money to 7-Eleven, it's going to code it. We can click in, if I open this in a new tab actually, and you can see what that bank rule is. So by clicking on this, you can open up what the bank rule is, and the bank rule here says all of the following conditions must be matched. It must be, I'm just looking here, it's going to set it as the contact 7-Eleven, and it's going to put it to general expenses, 20% VAT, 100% of the value of it. And the conditions that it looks for in order to apply those criteria is that the payee contains the name 11. So if it sees 11 in that bank statement description, it's going to automatically try and apply this rule. So if someone else pays you or you pay money to someone and their name has the word 11 in, it might incorrectly apply the bank rule. So do be careful of that. But that's the bank rule that was created. And so in the case of a bank rule, if you are happy with it, you can just hit OK. Do be aware that when you've done that, it's created the transaction in Xero, mark the transaction as paid, and match the two. There's no paperwork attached. So if you want to be above board here, I generally recommend not overusing bank rules. Yes, they save time, but they're not encouraging you to get that paperwork into Xero. So when it comes to dealing with these Cooper Street Bakery, you might say, you know what, I always spend less than 15, 20 pounds there, so I'm just going to create a bank rule so that I can just whiz through, because you might make the decision that you don't want to get paperwork for transactions less than 20 pounds, and that's okay too. It's really those bigger transactions that you want to worry about. Now, moving on to the third sort of scenario that you get in this category where it's okay to not have paperwork, and that is where you have transfers between your own business bank accounts. Now, it's important when you reconcile these that you also have the other bank accounts connected in Xero, either with a live bank feed or where you are manually importing the transactions. Otherwise, this won't work. So you need to make sure that the bank that you're transferring money between is set up in Xero with bank feeds running, or you manually importing bank feeds. Now, in this scenario, you know that you have received, so this main bank account has received £1,000 from your other bank account. So what you need to do is you need to use this transfer option here. And if you have more than one other bank account, so you have multiple bank accounts, a drop-down menu will appear here. But in the case of the demo company, there's only this main bank that we're in and the business savings account. So it's suggesting if you think this is a transfer, then it's going to the business savings account because there's no other account to choose from. Now, you might want to give it a certain reference or description. You might say, you know, it's VAT savings that was moved back into the main account. You can put a bit of a reference, but you don't need to. And you can hit the OK button. Okay, so in my 333 method, in this third category where we're happy that we don't need to attach paperwork or create the transaction first, we will, it's either where there's prepayments or income in advance from customers, or you could be doing the same to your suppliers. It's that it's bank fees or really small transactions where you're not going to bother attaching paperwork. And in the third scenario is where it's bank transfer between your bank accounts. Now, if you work through this 333 method, you should be covered for pretty much 95 to 99% of all eventualities. If you would like to know, like, what do I do in that other 5% of cases, then what I suggest doing is hitting that subscribe button. When I then do a video doing a deeper dive on how to deal with some of those trickier solutions, you will then know what to do. But for now, thank you for listening, and I would love to hear from you if you've got this far. Now that I've touched on everything I have in this bank rec, is there anything that I've left out that you think is a common issue that you think, this often comes up for me, why hasn't she addressed it? Let me know in the comments below, because if I get a comment on, you know what, Ray, like, this comes up commonly for me. You said it would only happen 5% of the time, but it happens for me almost weekly or daily. I want to know how to deal with it. I am more than happy to help. So comment below and I will do a video for you on that topic or that particular way that you need to reconcile the bank. Otherwise, thank you for listening and I'll see you again soon. Cheers.